Greetings and salutations to the 310 tribe. I'm trying something a little different here. Oh, seem to be breaking stuff. Um, I just wanted to stand up this time. Sometimes I get tired of just sitting down for hours on end. And as today I was working, at the office and it was just kind of just sitting all day. All I could think about was just standing up. And so I had this crazy idea of using my ironing board here as a thing to stand on. Of course, it's not the most sturdy of things. And then I was trying to do some other stuff with it, in between, like move stuff around, and everything started falling off. Of course, because it's an iron board. Well, hello everybody. Good to see you guys. We were trying to coordinate between Tyler and I because he wanted to do this. I don't know. He just does these programs whenever he does them. And earlier on in the year, maybe it was last year, I think like Chooch and me and Tyler Chooch and maybe Barry Scarborough. We were like picking out days so that we didn't step on each other, and so of course I had to give Tyler a hard time about that today. But it's good to see everybody here. Let's see, man. Oh, hey, Brooke. Brooke made it tonight. Good to see you, Brooke. Lisa, Amy, Sir Pierce Devale, Lisa Nelson, Pamela Minnick, Hammer Time, Catalin, Marine Mom, Texas. Let's see who else is here. Shenandoah, Kay McCullough. Well, hello to everybody, and welcome to tonight. Tonight's going to be a little bit. It's going to be a little crazy, so just bear with me. And I want to do more interaction with the audience tonight. Moderators, I know that some of you bounce between here and Tyler, so whatever you guys have to work out. If you can't get the questions, I can always just go through the chat and stuff and try and catch them as they come through. So I want the moderators, other than if there's like trolls tonight, other than that, I just want you guys to chill. Don't worry about the questions. If I see them, I'll just kind of stop and take them as they come. So, all right, let's do this. I'm going to start off by reading. And okay, just bear with me. So the title tonight is called Mixed Signals, and it's this high velocity paradox. And we live in this time that's very kind of just bizarre. It just sometimes things seem like they're going the way they're supposed to, and then other times they seem like they're going the exact opposite direction. And it's not just with uh, politics, but economics, religion. Everything seems to be moving in a direction. Then all of a sudden it reverses course, and then it goes back, and it's not the same as it was the first time. So let me start off by reading this. This is from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He says, "We know they are lying. They know they are lying. They know that we know they are lying, and we know that they know that we know that they are lying, and they still lie, and still they lie. History has been seen. History has seen tyrants and jackboots in regimes that declared evil plainly. But the new tyranny doesn't shout it; it drowns you with distractions and chaos. The new system doesn't need to burn books when everybody's faces are buried in their iPhones or in their digital devices. And then in doing that, it takes in a digital avalanche of contradictions, half truths, and manufactured consensus. We live in an age of mixed signals, and that's by design. As C.S. Lewis warned in The Abolition of Man, when objective truth is dismantled in the name of progress, man does not evolve, he devolves. He becomes easier to manipulate, to program, to herd, and the erosion of natural law and the moral absolutes isn't just a cultural drift, it's spiritual sabotage. As for Orwell, in his appendix in Newspeak, gives us a chilling prophecy. Quote, "The purpose of Newspeak is not only to provide a medium of expression, but to make all other modes of thought impossible. Today's language," end quote, "in today's language, wars, media reversals, and algorithms, censorship isn't random. There is an architecture being built in the world and being prepared for right now, this architecture of control. And it's a technocratic throne is going to be built on top of this chaos. Now, we're familiar with the idea that out of order comes chaos, or out of chaos comes order. I think the Latin phrase is ab ordo chao. Um, and we're familiar with the Hegelian dialectic and many of these other type of philosophical, quasi-political philosophies that have we see them in play pretty much everywhere we look. And as we go through tonight, you're going to see that as well. Um, While the left and the right scream at each other over their figureheads and policies, the real machine marches quietly on, driven by artificial intelligence, surveillance, biometric, ID systems, programmable money, and a global managerial elite. Whether the chaos is organic or orchestrated, it functions the same to make the masses cry out for peace and safety and order, even if it means surrendering your freedom. And as I saw one of the heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. Verse 4. So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? That's from Revelation 13. What we see in that chapter is a trifecta of control, and it's unlike anything the world's seen up until the point that it actually that comes to pass. Right now, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 193 sovereign nations. I think out of the 193 or 194, probably about 15 or so are what we would call failed states, places like Somalia, Haiti, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc., Yemen. Um, but there's coming a time when every nation, or what was a nation, is going to surrender itself either by force or by complicity, and they're going to surrender themselves to this new system that's coming about. And this system, when we go back to the book of Daniel, when it talks about these, the wild hybrid chimera type beast that we see in 7 and 8. Well, those are nations that are based off of the multi-metallic statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw in chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar saw a statue. That's from man's perspective. These wild beasts, they're not even natural beasts. They have just the Frankenstein, if you will. That's how God sees these kingdoms. And in the first three kingdoms, we know that there's a historical reference to them in the past, with that being the head of gold, equaling the lion, being Babylon, the leopard being Greece, the bear with the ribs in its mouth being Persia, and then the leopard with the wings and stuff being Greece. And then the final beast isn't given an animal specifically. It's simply described as a fearsome beast with iron teeth and iron claws, and it tramples everything. We know that was the Roman Empire. But this beast that we see coming in Revelation 13, when you read the beginning of it, it comes in reverse order, and whatever it is a far more terrifying type of beast than what we see in Daniel's explanations from those historical empires. It's an amalgamation of all these different empires. And Satan takes what is the strength of each of those and none of its weaknesses and uses that to create this new empire, now powered by this new existed before, whether we're talking about quantum computing, or we're talking about artificial intelligence, all the different biometric systems that we have in place, the satellites, the global satellite system, surveillance, all of that stuff is going to be used to power this new beast kingdom that's coming. Let me continue here. The beast kingdom is not a future concept. It is a technological framework being raised now. It is a future concept, but it is being framed now or raised now. And regardless of who occupies the Oval Office, Parliament, or the Kremlin, it's coming, right? It's going to happen. And I know that certain folks, even friends of mine that have very strong opinions about Trump or just politics in general. Um, I want to talk about that in a little bit. I mean, we'll get into that in a little bit because I tend to look at a guy like Donald Trump a little differently than, say, Matt does or JB Hickson or some other folks. And I don't, I simply look at the man's fruit of his life, right? If you go back over the last 40 something years of his life, and I'm going to be quoting tonight from his book, Art of the Deal, and you can see those same philosophies that he's held then are still the same ones we see in play today. I tend to think that he is being used by Satan, by the system, whatever you want to call it, to usher in this new AI architecture that is going to be so impenetrable and inevitable and so overarching in terms of its control and span of control. It's going to be the same kind of setup that we saw in 2020 when Trump, a businessman and a actor and a a celebrity in his own right, had the pandemic thrust upon him, and he was sitting there turning around trying to rely on these experts like I can't remember their names now, but you see their faces, right? Burks, I think, was one, and then the other guy, a little weasel-looking guy, I can't think of his name. Anyways, he was looking at them kind of distrustfully, but looking at them for the solution. How do we fight this? Because that's not his area of expertise. He is not a bio expert, or a virologist or any other of those things. Fauci, thank you, Pamela. He's just being used, and so I think going into it, he was a pretty naive. Now, I think what the crisis that's coming in this administration is not going to be biological. I don't even think it's going to be war necessarily. I think it's going to be digital, and it may be some type of a digital 9/11 if that could be a thing. But something will happen that will they will take this architecture and they will cement this into the fabric of everyday life of reality, just like the Patriot Act came out of 9/11. All of the draconian COVID lockdowns and all that stuff came out of 2020. Whatever this digital crisis is going to be, I think that is going to cement these cyber changes into the world today that will never be undone. Okay, well, they will be it when Christ returns, but let me continue here. Let's see. I'm going to quote here from Mark 13:23. It says, "For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. But take heed. See, I have told you all these things beforehand." And let me reemphasize that. It says, "and show you signs and wonders to deceive." Now, the 1 second after the rapture, the only way that people are going to be able to counter the supernatural signs and wonders. I mean, you got to remember, for the last, the better part of 300 or 400 years, well, let's just say 200 years to be safe, people quit believing in magic. They quit believing in the supernatural. They quit believing in all that stuff. In fact, they turned into science and even made a religion, so to speak, out of science. We call it scientism. And that is what's kind of guided the world for the last 150 years. I'd say since at least Darwin. And so the world is not ready for supernatural, right? We go to movies to escape reality, and we go watch our favorite superheroes or whatever. But you walk into that theater thinking, okay, that was the movies. That's not real life. And whether you say it out loud or whatever, you're just thinking that in your head. You know that. But what if you were to walk outside and there was some type of supernatural event happening? This guy is just pouring fire onto a car, or supernatural strength, or whatever, whatever happens. That's the world that's going to happen right after the rapture. And it's going to be terrifying. And people are not going to know what to do. And they're going to believe what they're seeing with their eyes. And the only way to counter that effectively is when you tell them beforehand, hey, after the rapture, this is going to happen, right? And so then people, if they were told beforehand and warned beforehand, they're going to know that this is bad. This is not something to marvel after. This is not something to like, ooh, this new beast system that's rising up. Who can make war against it? There's going to be people in awe of what's coming. They are going to be blown away, and they are going to be just they're going to be hardcore believers because they're seeing what they're believing, or believing what they're seeing. And the only way to counter that is when we tell them beforehand, hey, You're going to see these things, but they're not good. They're from Satan. They're from the source of evil. It's a bad, bad, bad thing that's going to happen. Okay, you're right, Deborah. The restrainer right now, I think, is not just holding back God's wrath. He's holding evil at bay to the degree that he does. And then also, he is preventing mankind, I think, from technologically advancing too quickly. It's just like he's the brakes. He keeps hitting on the brakes so we don't go too fast, too far. I mean, can you imagine if we got developed the internet back in the 1700s or the 1600s, where we'd be today? I mean, mankind, I think, would have ended a couple of centuries ago. But nevertheless, we're in this time where we're starting to see the veil thinning between our reality and the spiritual domain in the shape of UFOs, these orbs, the paranormal stuff, hauntings, poltergeist, all that stuff. I think it's all demonic activity, but it's being allowed to happen in a much more bold way than it had in decades past. All right. So this topic tonight is going to be broken up into several. I'm leading into it, right? That was the introduction, and I really want to focus on an article from Eric Wickstrom. He wrote this article called "Checkmate: The Triumph of Technocracy," and in that, it's going to talk about Trump. It's going to talk about JD Vance and Musk and all that. But before we get to that, and really that was kind of the gist of it. Um, I want to talk about the greatest threats we see today in the world and how it seems things are becoming paradoxical in nature and how, for example, and I'll talk about this in a second, but inflation is down. It had peaked at like 9% or whatever, and now it's back down under five, I think 4%. But we're not feeling those prices changing. So why are we not feeling those prices changing? Well, I think because the market currently likes the prices where they are. They like the high prices. They're making money. So this is what we would call price gouging. And I think that it's gonna continue until somebody forces them to readjust their cost back down. And maybe that happens this summer, I don't know. And we'll talk about the LA riots, we'll talk about uh, Trump's immigration policy and all that kind of stuff. But let me talk about the 10 greatest real threats to the earth right now as of June 2025. So we have the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. The danger in this is that it threatens to escalate and expand way beyond Ukraine, between just Ukraine and Russia. I mean, this is like a very, very thin line that everybody's walking. And if one stray missile were to go in somebody else's territory or land, or some non party to this conflict, vehicle or vessel or plane or whatever gets shot down or sinks or whatever, I think that could spark something very, very quickly. And I think if Russia or if the UK and if Germany continues to arm and escalates the types of arms they give Ukraine, I think that's cause for Russia to go ahead and attack them, because we would do the same thing. If we're fighting a country and they're getting all their weapons from another country, I mean, it makes sense for us to take that other country out, at least take out their manufacturing capabilities so they can't provide the weapons that are devastating us. All right. Climate change. Yeah, yeah. The climate changes every season, four times. The China-Taiwan tensions. Okay. So I very much view China as a wounded animal. I think they're on the descent. I don't think they're on the ascent, and you'll see that later in an article. Um, but in their descent, they are incredibly dangerous, and I think they're going to try and lash out and make somebody else the scapegoat. And for whatever reason, they haven't attacked Taiwan just yet. I do think that that's on the table, and I think eventually they will, and they will take Taiwan. I don't know to what great cost or whatever, and I don't know if that's before the rapture or immediately after the rapture. It's probably immediately after, but I know the cost right now for them to do this is incredibly high, the Chinese, because they don't know what Trump's going to do. They don't know if he's going to support Taiwan, which that's our policy to support them. Um, they just don't know exactly what the ramifications are. I mean, Russia a couple of years ago thought that they would go, roll into Ukraine and just roll it over. And if, truth be told, if NATO hadn't backed Ukraine, if the U.S. hadn't backed Ukraine, that would have already happened. But nevertheless, that threatens a new theater of war in the Indo-Pacific, which would not just be limited to China, Taiwan. I think North Korea, South Korea would be in play. I mean, there'd be a lot of different things happening. India, Pakistan. Um, we have Iran's nuclear threat. Iranians have rejected the Trump peace deal or the negotiations um, package for denuclearizing their nation. They rejected that. They said any attack would only escalate their ability to launch a nuclear weapon at Israel or whoever. So that is certainly in play. We do know that Iran does factor into, and Russia factor into, the Gog Magog conflict that I believe happens immediately after the rapture. With that said, I kind of think that the breaking the bow of Elam, I believe that's Jeremiah 49, if I'm not mistaken. And I think maybe we're overcomplicating it a little bit. I mean, if you look at the shape of Iran right there, where Elam is historically been, it's shaped like a bow. And I just looked at the map the other day, and I was in Sunday school in Winchester, Kentucky, in Jesse's class, and he's got a giant map up of the Middle East, and I just saw Iran, and it just struck me. I was like, it looks like a bow, and maybe somebody's already addressed this. Maybe Bill Salas or somebody's already like figured that out. I don't know. It just made sense to me that it looks like the shape of a bow. Maybe that's what it means, that that whole area is going to be just decimated because of their all their nuclear plants and stuff in there. Then we have the global economic instability and inflation domino effect. So this is something that we probably don't think about a lot, but if China were to collapse, or the UK, or some other major industrial nation, imagine the domino effect that that's going to have on their surrounding nations that have loaned them money, or dependent upon them for economic, whatever, or financial aid, or whatever the case is. I think that could cause a domino effect. That is a very real thing that can happen. We know Japan, if you've watched Britt Gillette here recently, he's talked a lot about Japan's economy. They're kind of coming into they're crashing and burning right now. So if Japan were to collapse, that would have a domino effect on so many different things. If y'all think back to, I think it was 2010, I think it was Greece that collapsed. And Greece has got a tiny, tiny, tiny economy. So that impact wasn't felt very strongly. But if another nation that had much more, stake in the global market, if they were to collapse, I mean, that could absolutely trigger some type of a domino effect because of how weak all of the industrial nations are in terms of our debt to GDP ratio, declining populations, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all the Western Hemisphere, almost every nation in the Western Hemisphere has major issues right now. Then we have number 5 and 6 are both kind of tied together. You have one is natural disasters in the United States and North America, and even Europe to a certain degree, and then also the seismic activity, the next one. Now we know about the Ring of Fire in terms of seismic activity, but we know also that there's been a number of earthquakes that are happening all over the places where there weren't traditionally thought to be earthquakes, or to be fault zones or anything like that. And so the big ones for the United States, obviously, in terms of seismic activity, or I would even say volcanic activity, is the Yellowstone caldera, the New Madrid fault zone that basically runs along the Mississippi River, which kind of cuts the U.S. in half, and then you have the California fault zones out there, and then you also have the Juan de Fuca subversion zone right off the coast of the Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And that place there, all three of those places are pretty volatile right now. There's a lot of activity happening. I personally believe that God's holding those things back. I don't think that they're going to happen just yet, because if the Yellowstone caldera went, I mean, it would basically kill the Earth. I mean, that would be a Earth-ending event type of thing, because not not just discounting all of the death that would happen in North America because of the eruption and the smoke and the ash and all that, but a super volcano ushering that much ash and smoke into the air, I mean, could blanket the Earth, the atmosphere, for who knows how long. We know that this happened before in history. I think it was in '96, there was a couple of major eruptions, and it caused so much smoke and plume. The smoke plume had caused so much pollution into the atmosphere that it lowered the Earth's temperature by like a degree or two. The same thing that these nitwits and the environmentalist guys, scientists are trying to lower the Earth's temperature. That's already happened naturally. And if you go to any source on the internet, it'll talk about the worst year, slash years, like 1 or 2 years in human history, and it's that time because the Earth lowered by 1 or 2 degrees. It caused massive crop failures, which caused starvation, which caused pestilence to kind of come to the forefront. And I mean, millions and millions of people died. And it was just generally considered the worst years on human history. Now, they're not looking at the flood or anything like that, but just, from secular history, that's what they consider the worst time in human history. Okay, the next one is the supply chain disruptions. Obviously, we have a global economy, and what that means is that our country is dependent on other countries for goods and products and things like that. Just like other countries are dependent, maybe, country A is dependent on country B for steel, right? And if that steel thing dries up, then that industry in country A dries up. And then that just has a domino effect, a ripple effect across the world. So you can imagine if any of the major corporations had some type of a breakdown, if China did invade Taiwan, the semiconductor, those chips, the computer chips, which Taiwan makes the majority of them, makes the best of them. That would disrupt the computer industry, the internet, everything for, I mean, who knows how long. I know the U.S. is trying to build that capability up here trying to build it up here in the U.S. The government is, but it still takes time. And so, if Taiwan were to go, for example, I mean, that would have massive ramifications across the world. Same thing with, particular rare earth minerals or metals or, anything that's in high demand that's found in very few places. Those become strategic choke points, if you will. And any of the disruption in that could, have this ripple effect across the markets. So think back to 2020, and then also think back to just here recently with the tariffs. As soon as the tariffs went into effect, I think back in April, all of those ships that normally are shipping from China from their ports to the American ports because we're their largest buyers, they're just sitting in their ports. Nobody's shipping. All our ports are empty. And there is a ripple effect to that. That means there's shortages in things that we would typically buy from China. So basically, everything inside of a Target now is going to be very limited, and that's going to have this economic ramifications in our own economy here in the U.S. That means that Targets, let's just say Target, for example, they can't get their goods from China, and they don't have a suitable replacement for said goods in elsewhere in the world, whether in the U.S. or India or some other place. And so there's a lot of scrambling. But in the meantime, you have empty shelves. And in the worst case scenarios, you have stores closing, people losing their jobs. Now, those people are having to go. I don't know how many people work in a traditional store like a Target or like a Walmart, but I can imagine it's in the hundreds. And those people are now out of work. I mean, so there's ripple effects all throughout this. And so, because our global economy has become so interdependent upon itself, on each other, any disruption to that in any sector then begins to have a ripple effect across the rest of the market, the global markets. Uh, we have cyber threats and AI weaponization, or cybersecurity threats and AI weaponization. So let me talk about cybersecurity real quick first. Any company, organization, hospital, university, government agency, everybody uses the internet. They use cyber systems. Every one of those cyber systems are under assault every single day, all day long. And if you go to a website like Dark Norse, you post this in the chat. You just Google it. I don't know if what the exact website is, but Dark Norse is, they track cyber attacks live. There's like a live map that happens. You can see. I mean, like all day long, every day. It's just like people are trying to hack into systems. You get people that hack into hospitals, and then they threaten to release all the files unless, so this hospital's getting blackmailed. So now there's insurance out for that. I mean, the cyber threat is absolutely 1000% real, and it's going to be used and it's going to be exploited, either a zero-day exploit or some type of black swan event or something that nobody really saw coming or anticipating, or maybe they did and nobody listened to them. But there's so many systems out there now that are so vulnerable that it costs. I mean, the rising bulk of cost for organizations that are dependent upon cyber systems, it's cybersecurity, securing up their systems, because there's always new things coming out and there's always new ways to hack in. And I will tell you that quantum figures really large into this, especially with regard to the what they call quantum Armageddon. And who snuck in? Oh, that was me. I typed that in. Unless one of my kids jumped on, I don't know. But anyways, they the quantum systems. So let's just say hypothetically, my laptop was quantum that I'm streaming on right now, and I decided to hack into the Federal Reserve or to the Pentagon or to anything. You would be able to do it because quantum can de-encrypt anything. It could hack anything very fast. There's nothing that we currently have now that is quantum proof, and so that's where nations around the world are rapidly racing to harden their systems against quantum, because it's coming. It's coming. And just as AI, there's a race to develop the first AGI or ASI system ahead of anybody else, because whoever develops it first, I mean, really, it's going to be a game changer for whichever nation holds it first. But the same way that that's a threat and that's advancing, the quantum Armageddon scenario is also a frightening thought, because everybody's bank accounts. I mean, they could literally, if you had that laptop, you could wipe out everybody's bank account in a matter of seconds. And so this is what keeps government officials up at night. They are trying very desperately to harden their systems against this new technology. And AI weaponization. Obviously, AI is really grown in leaps and bounds in just a few years, so fast, and it's only going to get faster and stronger and faster and stronger. And and what I'll allude to later in this article that I'm reading is that it's going to, either technology is going to we're going to either we're going to control technology, or it's going to control mankind. There's the only two options. There's no third option in that, in terms of where things are going. Now, then you have the global refugee humanitarian crises around the world as wars happen, as countries fall, as other nations use immigrants as, weaponization. They you know they fund, or, like a George Soros may fund, all these NGOs to support all of these massive amount of people coming up from like Colombia and South America and into the open borders under the Biden administration. There's other, Putin and other groups of nations will fund refugee immigration from, say, Turkey into Europe, or from the Middle East through Turkey into Europe. And that's why Europe is having these massive problems that they're having now. This is part and parcel what the Russians would help fund in groups like them, to help fund to destabilize their enemies. So it's a very useful and strategic strategy to weaken your enemies. Political, and the last one here is political polarization and social unrest worldwide. I think we are probably more divided now as a nation than we've ever been, even more than the 1859. And back then we were divided over just several issues. We're divided over states' rights. We're divided over slavery. We were divided over how much control the federal government has, yada yada yada. And there, those were legitimate issues at the time. But now there's probably like 20 or 30 different issues, major issues that people are divided on. And I personally don't know how that Humpty Dumpty gets put back together on that one. And I want to talk to Alex Newman at some point. I'll have him on the program, and I want to talk about the divided states of America and just how fractured we've become and how irreparable it. There's no way to fix what we're doing right now. Even if we enter into a golden age, economically speaking, there's no way to fix the fractures inside of our nation and the system that we're in now. It's too deep. It runs too hard. There's too much anger and resentment and violence behind actions here in the last 20 years. So I don't think that that's something that is going to get any better. I think, in fact, it's just going to continue to get worse and worse, which then allows for the government to increase control, increase militarization of law enforcement, surveillance, and so forth. So those are the major threats we're facing right now. Now, let me talk a little bit about Donald Trump's art of the deal and what I mentioned earlier about how I understand him as a man, and not as a president, but as a man, as a businessman, as a father, as a husband, etc. So I remember watching interviews with him in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, where he's been interviewed by Oprah and other folks. And he says the exact same things then as he says today. So he is the same guy, right? And he's now, I know I'm not defending his moral aptitude. I'm not defending any of his relationships or anything like that. All I'm saying is that from a just a general human standpoint, he seems to have very strong positions on right and wrong. And these aren't gray areas for him, they are pretty absolute. But let me read some of his Art of the Deal kind of key thinking points and talking points, and tell me if they sound familiar. Do they sound exactly like they sound today? And this was back in 1987 when this book came out. So number one, he likes to think big. He goes, I will be thinking anyway, might as well make it big, or might as well think big. Most people think small because most people are afraid of success. So again, you want to, some people will call it delusions of grandeur, whatever. He just calls it thinking big, right? Number two, protect the downside and the upside will take care of itself. He goes, I believe in the power of negative thinking. I always go into a deal anticipating the worst. He loves to make deals. He loves, I mean, that's his favorite thing to do is to, and if you notice his bargaining tactics, it's something similar to this. It's like, uh, he takes an issue that previously nobody had even messed with or talked about or thought about, and he goes in and he makes an over like a very bombastic claim, like we need to make Canada the 51st state, or we need to make Greenland part of the United States, or we're going to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, like stuff like that, right? Or turning Gaza into like a vacation strip with hotels and casinos and things like that. Turn it into like Dubai or something. And he makes these over the top claims, and then what happens is that the people that the people freak out. There's an overreaction on their part, and then they come back, and somehow in this negotiation, they seem like they talk him off the ledge. So now he's not saying that Canada has to be the 51st state, but there's going to be a change in that relationship, and it's going to benefit. We will be better off as a nation because he put that out there on the table to begin with than if we'd never said anything at all. So right now, I don't know necessarily with Canada what will play out, but with, for example, like the Gulf of America now is renamed. I guarantee you, there's deals being made right now with Greenland and with Denmark on the U.S. utilizing Greenland to a greater extent than we ever could have before. There may be new deals or ways in with certain provinces within Canada, like Alberta. That I don't know how that's all going to play out, but essentially what he does is he moves the chains, right? The chains are always kind of moving forward for him, and he'll make this claim, and even if he doesn't get what he wants, he's going to put the United States in a better position than had he not said anything at all. So that's just how he does stuff. We think, people that aren't familiar with him are just kind of like blown away by like, how can he say that? How can he do this? Blah blah blah. Well, that's just how he thinks, and so he's always going to look at the upside for that. Um, use your or know your or he says maximize your options. He goes, I always protect myself by being flexible. And if you've ever watched him in any kind of meeting with another leader, and some reporter asks him and says, "Hey, what do you think about doing this deal with these people?" He goes, "Well, I don't know. We'll see how it plays out." He's not committal in any shape or form, unless it's something that he generates to begin with. But if he's there with another leader, he's going to play non-committal. He's going to play very kind of. He's not going to tip his hand, because he likes to use his leverage, right? He loves to have leverage, loves it more than anything on the planet. He loves leverage. He says, he goes, the worst thing you can do in a deal is seem desperate to make it. That makes the other guy smell blood, and you're dead. You have to convince the other guy it's in his interest to make the deal. Another one is know your market. Another one is enhance your location. For him, it's location, 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 right? Uh, get the word out. He likes to. He says, I quote, the final key to the way I promote is bravado. I play to people's fantasies." And he says, so he comes out and makes these bombastic claims, or he makes these. He's very much larger than life. I mean, you can't go any. That guy can't go anywhere on the planet. Everybody's not going to know who he is. He is as iconic a person in this generation that we've ever had, as iconic as Abraham Lincoln, or Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy. There's people throughout history that have become, Gandhi, have become incredibly iconic because of their lives and the things that happened to them. That's him, right? And we'll talk about that specifically as we go forward. And then the last one is fight back. He loves to fight back, especially if he feels like he's being disadvantaged or whatever, or unfairly treated. He loves to fight. And so people that attack him, they should have never done that with him. Like, they completely mishandled how he stepped into the ring in 2016, or rather 2015, and he was pretty naive then to how dirty Washington would play, in the intelligence agencies and the deep state and the swamp and all that. So I think his eyes were pretty wide open coming in the second time, which is why he's been moving at such the pace that he has. The first 100 days, man, it was just like executive order after executive order. And I think he was doing that to what we call flood the zone, right? He's got so many things out there the media cannot keep up. The leftist organizations, the liberal organizations, there was so much being thrown at once that they just couldn't even process what was happening. And you also notice that, like, he would drop stuff on a Sunday night, late Sunday night, because he wanted that to dominate the news for the next 3 4 days. And so that's just how he does it. He wants to completely own the media. He wants them dancing to the beat that he sets. He doesn't want to be it like the first time, where he was kind of, he was always behind the eight ball running the first time, because so much against him. So he likes to control the messaging, right? He is very, very passionate about that. Now, Trump has done a whole lot of stuff in just a very short time, and some of that stuff doesn't make any sense. And in one sense, we talked a little bit about, him lowering their inflation rate because he's opening up energy, and that allows for the markets and stuff to begin to invest back into it, because they know that he's a pro energy president, right? Well, you start to see the market prices, the cost of fuel, things like that begin to drop down, and the inflation rate starts to go down. But the stores aren't changing their prices, right? They're going to try and milk this as long as they can until somebody forces them to adjust and correct their prices. So that's a bit of a paradox. In one hand, we're getting all of this money saved through Doge because they're stopping this corruption and they're stopping this grift that's going on. But on the other hand, the prices for milk and eggs and all that, I mean, eggs has come down a little bit, but everything else is still kind of high. We're like, why is it still high? But that's it. It's not Trump, it's the system working against him, but it produces this kind of paradoxical reality that we live in, where inflation's low, but the prices are still back under the old inflation prices. So I don't know. And I don't know how that gets corrected other than by the government forcing them to do that, which they don't want to do, because then you get into the whole market, the government influencing the markets. And that's the same thing that Kamala Harris got in trouble for in her campaign. Uh, foreign policy paradoxes. So let me talk about this a little bit. Now, we know that the first term that he had, the first nation that he went to was Saudi Arabia, and he's had long standing relationships, business and otherwise, with the Saudis. He's had long friendship with Netanyahu and then other leaders in Israel. So he's pretty keyed in with the Middle East. He knows who the players are. And so the first place he goes to is Saudi Arabia, and then he flies directly from Saudi Arabia to Israel, which you're not supposed to do from the Saudis' perspective. They weren't letting anybody fly directly from Saudi Arabia to Israel. Well, he broke that. He's like, I'm going to fly directly to Israel, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. And so he goes to Israel, and then we've had that close relationship the first term with them, culminating with Jerusalem being recognized as the eternal capital of Israel, first president to actually officially recognize that, and then secondly, moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So those are some major movements that happened in his first term. We also had some other things that were not so good from a Christian, evangelical, biblical standpoint. Things like the Abraham Accords. Um, there was another the kind of a policy limiting the settlers and stuff going on in northern Israel. And so, guys, if I'm missing your questions, I apologize. Hopefully, there's not any. If you have a question, please put it in the big word question, and then um, I thought this thing was going to scroll down. It didn't. It's not keeping up. But that's his policy is sometimes it seems like it's for Israel, then sometimes it seems like it's against Israel. I don't know how much of that is him and how much of that is Kushner and Witkoff and these other guys that are there. But he does have a strong advocate with for Israel with his ambassador to Israel with Governor Huckabee, or I guess Ambassador Huckabee now. So he does. There is more. I don't say more, but there's still people on his staff that have I think a biblical and proper understanding of Israel and why that is the I think when he starts to monkey with Israel, COVID, all this other stuff started to happen. But I think if he's supporting Israel, things seem to be going his way. And I know that seems kind of on the nose, but that's the way it comes across to me. This is from We Fly Soon Sister. Question: What do you think made Elon Musk jump off the deep end? I don't know. I don't know. He had some. Think about it this way: you've got two men with egos the size of their bank accounts that disagreed on something. They disagreed on this bill. And for Trump, he's looking at the bill, and yeah, there's probably stuff in there he doesn't like, but it's got a lot of stuff that he does like in there and that he needs to get passed. And he had already hired Musk to do Doge and to root out all the corrupt spending and everything else, grift. And I think Musk's frustration was more with the policy, the process of getting it from the House of Representatives to the Senate, and then all the pork and ham that gets added on and stuffed in there. He's not crazy about that. So I don't know, but it seems like they've made up. They are not BFFs necessarily, but they are friendly now. I guess they're not attacking each other anymore. But I think it was that bill, and I think we'll see here later why that upset Musk as much as it did. Okay, Catalan, gotcha. So let me go to Discord real quick. Let's see here. Discord, where are you? Too many apps. Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay, so from We Fly Soon Sister, with everything that's going on lately, what do you think about it all? So this is kind of what tonight is all about. Then I'm going to try and go through that. From Hammer Time, what should the U.S. response be to the Mexican president encouraging violence protesting in California? I think we're going to see that play out with our raids into Mexico regarding the cartels. And I don't know if it's going to be boots on the ground raids, maybe drones, maybe strategic strikes. I don't know, but I think that Trump takes this personally, and so if she is in fact encouraging violence, or she's encouraging lawlessness in the U.S., it's going to not bode well for her and for Mexico. Um, Patrick Hart, second coming might encompass a span of time like the day of the Lord. Example: my neighbor called. He's coming over now. His coming has taken effect, though he has not arrived yet. So not a single moment. Well, a couple of things. I think it is a moment in time, because when you read Revelation 1, it says that every eye will see him, and the earth will mourn. And so I think that at the end of the tribulation, at the end of the 7 years, I don't know the exact moment that it happens, but it's going to be a point where the sky peels apart, and from everywhere in the world they're going to be able to see this. And I'm not sure exactly how that's going to look, but 1 second. Okay. um Questions. Distracted here. So I do think the second coming itself is a moment in time. Now I think where there's some confusion on, like say the Battle of Armageddon, that's not a that's not going to be a single um, event. First of all, it doesn't happen in the Valley of Megiddo. That's where the armies are staging from. But if you go back and listen to like Chuck Missler, that those furlongs ends up being like, I forget how long it is, like 1,100 miles or 1,600. It says 1,600 furlongs, but a furlong's like, I think he said it was 582 feet. So times 1,600, whatever that amount ends up being. And it seems like it encompasses all the way around, from Megiddo down up through the Jordan River Valley, all the way back up to Israel, or to Jerusalem. Somehow it encompasses all that. And I think that's what the river, the flow of blood is going to be that long, and up to the horse's bridle. So I think that's uh, the thing that takes time. That is not a single battle. That's going to be kind of a moving battle, and not just on the earth. I mean, you're going to have fallen angels fighting. You're going to have, I mean, it's going to be a cosmic, in terms of fallen angels fighting demons, Nephilim, AI, humans. It's going to be kind of all over the place. So I do think that battle is going to take a while, but his actual appearing, I think, is going to be very obvious to the world. Let's see here. Second question is, okay. Justin Foy. Foy is a lot. I'm curious, and I don't know you from Adam, but do you have any relatives named Foy, like Foy Wallace? I'll be curious to find out. Question: have you seen Rudyard Lynch, young math whiz kid who predicted Civil War this year? I haven't, but if you have a link for that, it would be fascinating to watch. Okay. Next one is going to be, okay. That was that. We Fly Soon Sisters question. Annette, got any good jokes? Because I could use a laugh, because laughter is very good medicine. Um, I I heard one that's really good, and I don't know if it's not it's not risque or anything like that. I don't know. Let me think about that question. Um, All right, let me think about that joke rather, and when and how to tell that joke. Pete, or this is from Annette again. Pete, do you know anything about the near Earth asteroids? I just know about the one, Apophis that's supposed to do a near pass by on the 29th, 2029. But there's always some that come out of nowhere that we aren't tracking. They just seem to just kind of appear like, oh wait, there's a NEO. So that I don't know. I just know that they happen quite frequently. Okay, from Mossy Rock Ranch, do you think Patel and Bongino have been compromised or had their families threatened? I don't think they're compromised. So let me put what I think about Patel and Bongino and Pam Bondi and all those folks. I think they have a very, very, very difficult job of stepping into an organization that had been seeded by people like Obama and Biden for nearly 12 years, and it's just rife with corruption. And you're really having, and I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes. And you're walking into an organization that is already hostile to you. It's hostile to the Trump administration. It's hostile to Doge. It does not like them being questioned. They don't like to even be answerable to anybody else, and that's how they've operated for decades. But now they're being called to the carpet. So everything that they're having to do now, Bongino, Patel, etc., it's like pulling teeth. I mean, it's literally trying to get um, uh, just the smallest amount of information to come forward. It's like pulling teeth. So I do think they have things in motion that probably are going to be incredibly sensitive, and they're not going to release anything, unlike previous administrations. They're not going to release anything until they're ready to like drop the hammer. And I think we'll see those hammers start to drop. I don't know when, I don't know how. They have a lot of information there, and in fact, I don't think there's not anything in Epstein's file on Trump that is going to do any damage to him. If there was something in there that was nefarious, or there was something in there that was politically damaging, they would have already used it. They've had 9 years to try and take him down so that he would not be able to run this time. And if it was there, and this Epstein file's been in the FBI's hands for a long time, they would have already used it on him. So I do think that there's probably a lot of sensitive things in there that have to be managed. I don't know. Um, it's like there's people. Their whole job is they work for like celebrities and for politicians and others, and they basically protect their image, right? So they hire them to go take down all the dirty internet posts. They go after the people that are posting that stuff. They go there's people that's their job. They protect their client and their client's image and their persona, their public persona. And so they get paid a lot of money to do this. And so I do think there's probably a lot of that being foisted upon the DOJ and others to not release it. So I'm sure there's a lot of back and forth, right? And I'm not talking about average Joes. I'm talking about very, very, very powerful people that don't want this out. So it's probably not as easy as we think it is just to release it. They did release kind of the stuff that was already out there, but there's probably a lot of stuff in there that is incredibly damaging to a lot of powerful people, and it's harder to release than they initially thought it was going to be. Um, Juanito, wait, have you heard about a black star in our solar system coming toward our sun? IMP energizing our Earth's core, heating magma, warming oceans. I heard there's a planet beyond Pluto that's identified now. I don't know if it's coming, if it's just in orbit, but there's something out there. There's stuff that I've seen like from real footage from like the International Space Station and others. There's large, like, I mean, ridiculously large, like ships. They look like ships in front of the sun. And if you were to take that ship and how big it is compared to the sun, it's bigger than the Earth. I mean, it seems like it's bigger than the Earth, just from how far away it is and how big it still looks compared to the sun. It has to be massive, and it doesn't look like a planet. It doesn't look like anything natural. It looks like something somebody made. I don't know. I don't even know how to process that stuff. We know that the we know that the we know that the fallen angels. I'm firmly believing that the fallen angels are the ones behind all this stuff we see going on in space and on the Earth to a certain degree. Um, but they're not. Uh, to what ends? I think it's going to be used for some type of deception. I don't. But they've not revealed themselves in that way, in such an undeniable way just yet. I think 1 second again, at 1 second after the rapture, they will absolutely show themselves, and people are going to be blown away. And this is part of the whole deception thing going on. Okay, from T Bone, question: do you think we have gotten soft? We speak loud and carry a little stick. All talk, no action. Yeah. We'll talk about this in a little bit with some stuff from C.S. Lewis, the abolition of man. It talks about the men without chests, without a chest, like they don't have any, or backbone. They're just weak men. I think we've allowed ourselves. I think, in fact, most of Western civilization has become very feminized and emasculated in terms of all the processes and systems and stuff we have in place now seems to be geared towards, emasculating or demasculizing society. And it starts in school where the majority of your teachers are women. You go into that's all the way through education, really. The majority of the teachers, instructors, whatever, are going to be women. And then there is the culture, music, TV, et cetera, et cetera. I just think men now have become soft because society has forced them to become soft. There is a bit of pushback now, thankfully, after this whole Me Too movement and all that. I think there is a bit of pushback where men, my age and, say 30s and up, are just choosing not to get married because they don't want to deal with all that TikTok drama. They don't want to deal with any of that stuff. And women have been so empowered that they think that they can divorce a man, and they have kids, and they divorce a man and they leave them and they're out the door. And I'm not talking about a bad guy or a guy that's an abusive husband or anything like that. I'm talking about a good man that's just, not as exciting as the wife may want him to be. And this happens a lot. And the majority of divorces are these kinds of situations where a woman is not happy in the marriage for whatever reason. And there's nothing in there that would, uh, you know, he's not abusing her. He's not mentally, emotionally, or anything else other abusing her. He's not, he's providing for them. He's a good provider. He works, and she just gets bored, and she wants to. The grass is greener somewhere else. There's a Chad out there she wants to hook up with. I call them Chads. We used to call them Jodies in the army. Like as soon as a guy goes on deployment, Jody comes around. Jody's that single guy that just wants to hook up with all the wives while the husbands are gone. Chad's the same way. And if your name is Chad out there, I'm sorry, or Jody. This is just common lingo. It's like people being called Karen. If you're a Karen, you're somebody out there, a woman out there complaining. But the fact is that these women get out there in the real world, and aside from the child support that they get, the alimony is going to dry up if they get alimony at all, and they're going to find out how difficult it is and why men have to work as much as they do just to make ends meet because inflation, because of all these other things. It's brutal. It's a brutal place to be, and I couldn't even imagine trying to be a single a mother out there trying to do this. Even if she has a degree, even if she has, the market is just incredibly a difficult place to get into unless you're willing to work, food service industry or some other kind of menial job that doesn't pay anything. Okay. If you were talking about carrying a little stick from the government perspective, I think that the time of talk is kind of worn itself out, and we've had a couple of different stages for this. For example, like October 7th was a day that Israel's not the only solution they had was military. I mean, there was no other solution that was even worth considering. And I think that we've come to a point where a lot of these, like Iran and their nuclear plant, they're not going to change their plans. They're going to keep pushing ahead. That's going to result in a military conflict. Whatever happens with Ukraine and Russia, if this doesn't put into some kind of a peace, or stalled out or peace settlement or whatever, it does have the potential to explode all over Europe. So, will those things happen? That I don't know. Um, I don't think a World War III type scenario is going to happen prior to the rapture. I think it's going to be kind of leading up to it, and I think that we'll get to that point, and after that point, the rapture happens, and boom! I think all of the barriers and all the restraint that was put in place right there, that's all gone, and I think that's when you start to see this massive eruption of conflict around the world. Um, okay, let me get back to the article, and then I'll finish off the questions later here. Let's see here. We talked about some of the paradoxes. Messaging from the media, Trump's kind of war on the media, calling them fake news. And you can see that the mainstream media has completely delegitimized itself with their just sycophant behavior towards the Democrats, towards Biden. They covered for Biden for years, claiming he was competent, claiming he was capable of leading. And the guy couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs. I mean, the guy had issues. He wandered off stage. He was shaking hands with people that weren't there. Mumbled incoherently all the time. So that all kind of came to the forefront. There was a point where they couldn't hide it anymore, and then they act all shocked and surprised. No, he's been like that the whole time. They just were covering for him. Um, Global reactions. So I know a lot of people freaked out when Trump went to the Middle East this last time. He didn't even go to Israel. Well, and to be fair, he doesn't have to go to Israel every time he leaves the United States. I mean, so that's one thing. He went to the Middle East to make deals. Again, he's a deal maker. His solution for everything is to make a deal, and that revolves around money, whatever. And it's I see him as a guy that looks at the world through those kinds of lenses. He looks at it from a very human businessman lens. He thinks he's not looking at it from the biblical lens. And he might believe in Jesus and he might be a Christian. I have no idea if he is or he isn't. But he is not operating and functioning with that biblical lens on, regarding the things he says, like calling the golden age. And even if he is a Christian, even if he is uh, sensitive to Christian things, he's got somebody like Paula White leading him in the spiritual team there. Like, that just shows me he has zero discernment on when it comes to biblical matters. He might be the world's best salesman. He might be the world's best businessman. He's a terrible theologian, but he does get Jesus right. I'll say that he does describe Jesus and the significance of him and the significance of Easter correctly. Okay, so let me jump into the article here. This article again. This is from Eric Wickstrom's the Checkmate. What is it called? The Checkmate, the triumph of. I think it's the technocracy, the triumph of, or Checkmate, the triumph of technocracy. And so now I'm going to read this because it's so well written. But I'm gonna after the show, I'll link the article in there. You guys can read it for yourself. It's a really long read, but it's worth reading. And just to be fair, I don't agree with his conclusion because he's not coming from this from a Christian perspective. He's not looking at it from the eschatology we would look at it from. He's just simply looking at it from a human secularist kind of perspective. But here he goes. He says, and I'm not even going to read all of it because it's too much to read, but I'm going to read kind of the pertinent points to this. Part one: the perfect storm setting the stage. Now, what began with the subtle changes in society's foundation has revealed itself something far more calculated: the growing polarization, the accelerating technological revolution, the institutional breakdowns. None of these were random events. They formed the opening moves in a transformation so ambitious that even describing it risks sounding implausible. Thank you, Wiggle, Wiggle Watcher for Jesus. Shiba dog wearing samurai armor, riding "You're amazing" in the air with sparklers. Thank you. Um, where was I? Okay. The blueprint. Three elements converge to create the perfect conditions for change. First, there's a strategic erosion of trust. This is huge because when a population no longer trusts their government, it's pretty much game over at that point. Government agencies making decisions that seem designed to undermine their own credibility. Media organizations abandoning even the pretense of objectivity in ways that destroy their authority. Political processes long ago delved into such obvious theater that they undermine the entire system's legitimacy. Second is a precise channeling of public frustration. Rather than focusing on specific targets, anger fragmented and turned inward toward the society or against the society itself. Left and right polarized beyond dialogue. Different social groups found themselves in perpetual conflict. Each attempt at reconciliation or compromise failed in ways that deepened divisions. And third, the emergence of technology sophisticated enough to enable total control. For the first time in history, the technical capability exists to implement governance through algorithms, monitor populations comprehensively, and automate resource allocation across entire societies. The formula. This formula follows a classic pattern: problem, reaction, solution. We've talked about this, the Hegelian dialectic. So the problem is you create or amplify problems severe enough that the population demands change. Reaction, you wait for the reaction. There's frustration, anger, calls for reform. And then the solution. Present solutions that would never be accepted under any normal circumstances. And normally these solutions are already created at the outset. They're just waiting to be for the people to demand that we do that. Now, the execution of this formula shows remarkable sophistication. Each crisis connects to the next. Every institutional failure creates specific vulnerabilities, and each scandal opens the door for predetermined solutions. The hidden pattern. What makes this moment unique isn't just the individual elements, but their perfect synchronization. The technological capability has matured exactly as social structures weaken and power concentrates in the hands of those with a specific vision for humanity's future. Consider how each aspect reinforces the others. Digital platforms replace traditional information sources just as trust in media collapses. AI systems emerge as alternatives to human judgment right as faith in the institutions fails. Private infrastructure displaces public services precisely when government credibility hits its historic lows. This isn't coincidence. These changes follow a design so precise that it remained invisible until its effects became irreversible or almost irreversible. Like a master chess player's strategy, the true pattern only becomes clear when the position's already won. I'm going to pause here for a second. Now, he is tapping into some very, very clear markers that are we can just look at and see. Yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Biden versus a guy like Trump, and there's just no comparison. Biden should be in hospice or something. Somebody should be taking care of that guy 24/7. Um, and the whole thing with trust again, the media organizations are just completely undermining their own trust and their any pretense of objectivity to throw their whole lot in with the Democrat Party. And that's why nobody watches CNN. That's why nobody their ratings have absolutely cratered. More people are going to watch this than it's going to watch their show tonight. I mean, it's really really pathetic. But let me continue. The stakes. We are witnessing more than a political realignment or a technological revolution. This is fundamental restructuring of society, a transformation that uses our legitimate frustrations with failing systems to implement something far more controlling. The true scope of this change remains hidden because its architects speak in languages of progress, efficiency, and innovation. They present each step as a natural evolution rather than what it is. a calculated move toward a new form of social organization. To understand how this transformation operates in practice, we need to examine its most visible manifestation, the carefully orchestrated performance centered around Donald Trump. Now, let me again pause here. I don't agree with him in the sense that some of the things he's going to talk about, I don't think Trump had anything to do with or even knew, was happening. I do believe that the Bible is very adamant in Daniel 2, Romans, what is it, Romans 16, that God puts leaders in place, and also in Acts 17:26. God is the one that sets the boundaries for nations. He raises kings up, he deposes them. So I am thoroughly, thoroughly convinced that Trump is where he is because God wants him here at this time, and he ran exactly as how he was going to run. Oh, give me 1 second. Let me fix my battery here. I don't know. I think that fixed it. Okay. My screen over here was like, "Hey, you're about to die." I was like, "Ah." So he doesn't look again. He doesn't look at this from a Christian or biblical or eschatological perspective. So keep that in mind. Now, the game in action, Trump's role revealed. In this atmosphere of systemic collapse, the perfect outsider emerged. A figure so improbable, so controversial, so seemingly chaotic that no one could suspect his role was precisely choreographed. I'm pausing here by God. I think God is the one that put him exactly where he is. I'm going to continue. Donald Trump appeared as the antithesis to the system people had lost faith in, the ultimate anti establishment rebel. But this was no accident. It was the next act in a brilliantly executed performance. Now, I will say this about the writer here. He's going to make some allusions to um, this grand scheme of elites that are controlling everything, the puppet masters. And there are puppet masters and there are elite. I'm not denying that. But they can't control everything right now. It's still, things are still way too chaotic around the world, and there are things that are unpredictable that happen that they would have no control over anyways. I think the assassination attempt on in Butler, Pennsylvania it was planned for one particular outcome, and let me just say what it is. I think that because Trump at that time had not yet. Well, let me back up. Why would any Republican run against Trump? Once Trump announced that he was going to run again, why would anybody throw their hat in? There had to be motivation behind not just becoming president, but somebody was motivating them financially or otherwise to actually throw their hat in and make it a run, make Trump run, right? And so I think everybody that did that initially was like, "Yeah, this is stupid. I'm getting out," and so they got out very quickly. The one person who stayed in, Nikki Haley, had managed to gather some delegates. Now, had Trump not turned his head in Butler, Pennsylvania that day, we would have seen the whole world would have seen what the inside of his head looks like. I mean, that's without a doubt. But he had turned his head, and it did graze his ear, and he did survive. And for whatever reasons, the collusion that was by the FBI and the other folks that were there that allowed this guy to crawl on the roof and do what he did, or attempt to do what he did, and not even I'm not even discounting that it came from the water tower, that somebody was up there either, the real professional, whatever. That may have happened too. I don't know. But the fact is that Trump turned his head. And that wasn't something that anybody could have planned. No, nobody, no leader in their right mind, especially a guy worth what he's worth, would have intentionally put himself in that kind of scenario where he could have possibly died. Um, I find that incredibly impossible that he would even allow himself to do something like that. Just because he's too egotistical. He's not going to. He's not going to let him. If he just if you were to try and game this out and try, you couldn't game it out that perfectly. I don't care how good a sniper the guy was, uh, whether the tower or on the roof there. I would not have put my life in any of those guys' hands. I don't care how good they are because there's too many variables and factors that can happen. You just can't plan for. So I do believe that it was accidental, or I mean, not accidental. I believe that his turning his head was divinely, something that he did that God allowed him to do or did it for him or whatever. But he did survive that, and that did change everything for him. Now, with that said, uh, the perfect pawn, and I'm skipping some of this because he goes into different places, but uh, a chess master wins not through individual moves, but by creating positions where every opponent's move strengthens their strategy. This perfectly describes Trump's phenomenon. Each attempt to stop him made him stronger, and every attack increased his immunity. All resistance cemented his position. The pattern was too perfect to be coincidental. Media attacked him relentlessly, but always in ways that confirmed his fake news narrative. Federal investigations launched with great fanfare, only to end in anticlimactic, and that again strengthened his positions. The leaks that emerged with peculiar timing, always maximizing their effect, not against Trump, but for his agenda. It was like watching a boxing match where every punch from the opponent somehow builds the champion's strength rather than depleting it. Now, let me rabbit trail here real quick. There was a fight back in 1997 at the Thomas and Mack Center, Las Vegas. This was Mickey Ward versus Alfonso Sanchez. And if you've ever seen the fight, for the first 7 rounds, Mickey's losing, and he got knocked down in the fifth. But he's just taking a beating, and he's constantly on the defense. But in his strategy, and I don't know if this is something that he went into the ring thinking it was going to do, or if it's something that just developed in the course of the fight. But in his defense, this guy Alfonso is wearing himself out. I mean, he's just throwing everything he has at him. And then it says here, let me read this. Mickey, who survived the fifth round knockdown, lost nearly every second of every round heading into the seventh. Frustrated and switching back and forth between southpaw and conventional stance, Ward looked lost as he was uncharacteristically on the run. Quoting him, it says, I started out in the defensive mode and I just couldn't get out of it, Ward said. So I just started moving and moving and moving. And I don't usually move around like that. And for some reason, my legs just kept moving and I wouldn't stop. I knew that I had to do something. And I said to myself that I've got to fight no matter how strong he was. I've got to fight no matter how strong he was. I've got to give myself a chance. And I did that. After connecting with a hard body shot to open round seven, Ward began to grow more confident. Moments later, he completed the most unlikely of knockouts, dropping Sanchez for good on a sudden left hook to the body. But because this guy had been boxing and he'd been going hard this whole time, it just took one shot from Mickey on the left side, and Alfonso goes down. He's done, right? The fight's over. So the whole time he looks like he's losing, and it's just that one shot at the very end that takes his opponent out. So I think the media, a lot of these Democrat, politicians, their influencers, all that, everybody went all in, and they're just throwing haymakers and jabs and everything at Trump. And at the end of it, he just like taps them on the side, and boom, they're done. And I think that's how it kind of played out to me, at least going into 2024 or 2025. Okay, so back to the article. Just take his opponent in the presidential race as the ultimate example of the theatrical, and he uses a swear word here. I'm going to just say crap show. There stood the establishment's champion, demonstrating in real time why the system needed disruption. An aging politician, you talk about biting, struggling with basic articulation and climbing stairs. The establishment's representative barely able to represent himself, and the system's defender personifying its decay. Talking again about Biden. The ultimate dramatization. Each element of resistance played its role perfectly. His establishment opposition demonstrated exactly why the system needed a complete reset. Media criticism proved their bias and untrustworthiness. Congressional challenges showed that the ineffectiveness of traditional checks and balances. The culmination came with the alleged assassination attempt, an event so perfectly timed, so dramatically staged that it transformed Trump from a political figure into something almost messianic. The timing within the campaign cycle, the spectacle of the event, the miraculous survival all contributed to the creating the ultimate justification of what was to come. And pausing here. Again, remember I said that Nikki Haley was the only Republican candidate that had delegates. Had Trump not turned his head, she would by default been the Republican candidate. And she would have gone in Monday morning. So that was Saturday. Monday morning, she would have gone in to the Republican convention with all of the news and the assassination and all that kind of stuff. And they would have sworn her in, or she would have gotten it, and she would have picked some other rhino with her, and we basically would have another version of Kamala and Biden up there, just with different letters in front of their name. So that's why I think that was the game plan going into it, that they were going to take him out and then put Haley in, and that's why she stayed in the race as long as she did and managed to gather a couple of delegates, just so that when this happened, she would by default be the incumbent, or the Republican nominee, and she wouldn't have changed anything different from Biden. It would be very minimal changes. I mean, it's just surface level stuff, and I think that's who the big, not big pharma, but big military industrial complex types wanted her in because she's a war hawk. She likes war. So I think that was kind of the plan going into it. Obviously, that didn't happen. So now, but this author is looking at this from a much more conspiratorial look than I am. I'm just, I don't, I don't, people, these guys are stupid. Not all of them, but most of the Democrat Party morons. And they might have degrees and they might be lawyers, but morally, ethically, etc., they're morons. Um, So here's the ultimate dramatization. Each element of resistance played its role perfectly. His establishment opposition demonstrated exactly why the system needed a complete reset. Media criticism proved their bias untrustworthy, and then the congressional challenges showed the ineffectiveness of traditional checks and balances. That is key right there. What we're seeing now is that we're operating under a political system of checks and balances that was designed to cause gridlock. It was designed that way on purpose so that things would not move too quickly. But we live in an age where information's doubling less than every 24 months. The accumulated information that's online is doubling. The information processing power that we have to crunch data doubling. I mean, things are moving so quickly. The system that we have now cannot keep up with it, and that's just a fact of life. It's not, the founding fathers had no way to comprehend that internet or all this would change this way, but it has, and now the system of government that we have is not able to keep up in real time with the changes that are happening on the ground. That is going to become a increasingly difficult problem for us, and that's why Doge is there. That's why Doge is implementing all this stuff, and you're going to see, we'll see this here in the article. So I agree with a lot of what he's saying. I don't There's some of this I don't agree with necessarily. um, okay. This was a moment when Trump transcended ordinary politics. He was no longer just a candidate, he was the chosen one, the survivor, the man they had tried to silence but failed. Every future countermeasure, no matter how extreme, could be justified in necessary self defense. The larger game. But while the world focused on political drama, the seemingly epic battle between establishment and outsider, the real game proceeded behind the scenes. Trump was never meant to be the true rebel. He would crush the system, or who would crush the system. He was, however, the perfect tool for implementing a new, more sophisticated form of control, just like George W. Bush was. Like a masterful illusion, the audience focused so intently on the obvious conflict that they missed the real transformation occurring backstage. While everyone watched Trump versus the deep state in the shadows, the real players methodically positioned themselves to assume control of society's fundamental functions. A new power elite with a vision far beyond traditional politics prepared to step onto the stage when the old order imploded under the weight of its own apparent incompetence. To understand the true nature of this transformation, we must understand the philosophical blueprint guiding it, a vision first articulated by Silicon Valley's hidden philosopher. Give me 1 second, folks. 1 second. Sorry, I got wife's texting me on some stuff. Um, where did I leave off? Okay, the larger game. But while the okay, I read that. Okay, the real player, Silicon Valley's dark vision. Behind the money and influence flowing into the Trump campaign lies a set of radical beliefs and a dark agenda. The tech elite of Silicon Valley believe the American empire stands on the verge of collapse. Rather than prevent this collapse, they aim to accelerate it while creating a safe landing zone for themselves and their assets and territories where they can run their own governments. Now, we've seen through the news a lot that Mark Zuckerberg, all these people are beginning to build their doomsday bunkers in Hawaii and New Zealand and other places. Um, this is kind of what that's alluding to, that they see the collapse coming and they're trying to prepare themselves and get their assets and everything in ready or in position so that they can survive whatever comes. Isaiah 53, thank you for the super chat. Sorry, I missed you there earlier. Um, Elon Musk and his growing empire represented the visible spearhead of of this movement, and through his control over everything from space travel to social communication, he was systematically building the infrastructure required for the new order. But Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, Balaji Srinivasan, Mark Andreessen, and other tech bros would also play key roles. Yet these tech billionaires were only the visible actors. Behind them lay a vision so radical that it seemed unthinkable, a vision shaped by Silicon Valley's secret philosopher. Under the pseudonym of Meniscus Moldbug, a San Francisco programmer named Curtis Yarvin wrote a series of essays that would transform Silicon Valley's worldview. His concept, which he called Patchwork, envisions a world where the failed democratic systems is replaced by thousands of corporate run entities, each governed by its own joint stock company without regard for residents' opinion. In Yarvin's vision, nations dissolve into corporate run territories, democracies yields to CEO dictators, citizens become customers, rights become services, governance becomes algorithmic. His early writings were shockingly direct about the implications. When discussing surplus populations, he proposed either using them as biodiesel or containment in virtual reality prisons. And while later he claimed biodiesel comment was a joke, he remained serious about the digital prisons. Years later, when Balaji Srinivasan, I can't say his last name, presented his own concept called the network states, he performed a masterful repackaging of Yarvin's ideas. And if you've listened to Matt Shepherd for the King, he talked about Yarvin quite a bit. I've read Yarvin before a long time ago. I didn't know who he was. I was reading some other things that he was writing, but I didn't put two and two together until I came across this article. Um, the dark vision of corporate dictatorships transformed into something that could be presented at a TED Talk. Corporate dictatorship became startup society. Total surveillance became digital community. Forced compliance becomes opt in governance. Social control becomes community standards. And you see, it's just kind of the same way with DEI, how they tried to redefine things so that it doesn't sound like what it says it means. This is kind of the same thing that they're doing. They're taking these phrases. If you've ever heard the phrase corporate stakeholders or stakeholders, global stakeholders, etc., that is socialist Marxist kind of framework. Uh, but we've incorporated that into our own lexicon here within our own. It's not designed for our system. We talk about corporate stakeholders and things like that, um, or it's like global stakeholder. It's some phrase like that that's used, and it's very socialist in nature. But these aren't the theoretical discussions. Peter Thiel or these aren't mere theoretical discussions. Peter Thiel, beyond his company Palantir, invested 15 million in JD Vance's Senate campaign, the largest single donation to a Senate campaign in history. Elon Musk took control of global communications through Twitter/X. Mark Andreessen and others were actively funding experimental cities. So what he was saying here is it's not just talk anymore. They're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're beginning to move things politically, economically, socially, with all their power and wealth that they've accumulated. Now, the tech elite justify their position by seeing themselves as courageous geniuses on the new frontier. This isn't speculation. They say it openly in podcasts, conferences, interviews, and blog posts. Some speak quietly, others loudly, but they share a common vision. One is to replace democratic governance with corporate rule. Two is to substitute human judgment with AI systems. Three, create territories beyond the traditional state control. And then four, implement total surveillance under the guise of security. And their justification is if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about, right? But we know how that turns out, right? The war on terror, because we never defined what that was, it could mean mujahideen in Afghanistan fighting us. It could also mean the soccer mom, the Christian mom at the school board standing up and saying, "Hey, I don't like this being taught to my family or my kids." The government can define who they want the enemy to be. If it's not already defined clearly in law, it can be reshaped to whatever and whoever they need it to be. Thank you, Amy Potter, for that. I appreciate you. So from theory to reality, we have Trump's freedom cities on federal land, charter cities in Honduras, networked states experiments in various countries, digital currency initiatives, AI governance system. Each project serves as a prototype for the larger vision. And when Trump speaks of building new freedom cities on federal land, he's describing Yarvin's patches in new packaging. When tech billionaires invest in charter cities, they are creating test beds for corporate governance. And skipping down to the AI component, artificial intelligence isn't just another technology in this vision, it's the key enabler. AI provides the means to replace human judgment, the tools for total surveillance, the systems for resource allocation, and the justification for eliminating democratic input. And that's going to be easy to do when our systems have been so corrupted and so damaged by corrupt politicians and corrupt agendas for so many decades. How hard is it going to be to push people over to a system and say, look, this AI system is not Republican, it's not Democrat, it just functions to do what it does. Why shouldn't we trust that? That's what we want, right? We don't want agendas inside of this. I'm telling you, it's becoming more and more appealing to people the longer this goes on. When tech leaders discuss AI safety and control, they're laying the groundwork for a new form of social organization. Now, he goes on to talk about Doge, but in Yarvin's book, he has this thing called RAGE, and that stands for Retire All Government Employees. And we've definitely seen that starting here. And the I guess what he's talking about here as well is that the government is going to start making it so impossible to work for the government, moving people around, changing titles, doing this, doing that. They're doing that with FEMA right now and with other organizations that people are not going to stay around. Every day, every week, people are retiring. I'm talking about big, leadership type folks, people that have spent their whole lives trying to get up to that position are now just stepping out and saying, we're done. But that's by design. The Department of Government Efficiency serves as a vehicle for this transformation, and under Elon Musk's direction, what presented modernization reveals itself as rage in action. Mass layoffs labeled as efficiency measures. My friend, there's a lady I work with. She says measures all the time. It's like big. I don't know. It's stuck in my head. Elimination of oversight described as streamlining. Transfer of state functions to tech companies called modernization. Replacement of human judgment with AI branded as optimization. As Yarvin himself expressed it, quote, to install a new operating system, you must first shut down the old one. Rage is the control alt delete for the state. So in this case, it would be Doge, right? Now, this guy wrote this back in the 90s. So Rage and Doge, I mean, it's kind of close. Strategic network. The tech elites have methodically positioned key players in critical roles like pieces on a chessboard. Each serves specific function in a larger strategy. We talked about Elon Musk. through Doge, directs the dismantling of state functions while positioning his companies to replace them. Starlink for internet control, X for which will become the everything app for informational and financial control, XAI for decision systems, or Grok. Well, I guess it's Grok. Tesla and SpaceX for physical infrastructure. Peter Thiel operates more subtly through Palantir and his network of allies, building their surveillance and control infrastructure that the New World Order will require. His influence extends from national security to the financial system. And then JD Vance represents a particularly sophisticated placement. With his strong connection to Peter Thiel, working class background, and Yale education, he moves seamlessly between the worlds. And when he speaks of reforming bureaucracy, he uses language that sounds harmless to most, but signals that dark agenda uh, to initiates. The accelerated timeline. Unlike traditional authoritarian transformations that move slowly to avoid resistance, this operation shows no such caution. The sprint towards the goal suggests either complete confidence in success, two is a race against time or control of AI, and then three is the strong contingency plans. Now, while the media focuses on the political drama, the real transformation proceeds. State functions transfer to private control, democratic processes yield to automation, new control systems install piece by piece. Now, I wanted to. There was something on here that I saw. There's so much of it here, and again, I'm going to link to it here. Where was this at about? There was something to the effect of. Let me see. That's not what I want. It's this one. There's something about Musk. Musk right now he has so much money that he can fund the UN for like 14 years. He could have a standing army of elite mercenaries of 100,000 elite mercenaries as his own personal army. Like he can afford that. There's something else that he could afford to do. But like these guys are so wealthy, so insanely wealthy that they can literally have their own armies. They're more powerful than certain presidents in many of these other countries. And I guess what the guy is alluding to, because I don't want to keep reading from this, but what I wanted to say is that it's inevitable. It is inevitable because the Bible said it was inevitable. And that's the way the world's going to look like in the world of Revelation 13. It's going to be the trifecta. It's going to be the government, the financial system, and the religion, all under one control of one system. Now, how does the world look like? It talks about the 10 heads, the 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. I think I don't know. I don't know if these are like imperial type regions set up that are maybe run by corporate entities or something. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not going to be the world today. The world of today is not going to be the world of Revelation 13. The world of Revelation 13 is going to be very, very condensed into these 7 and 10 systems, like seven the land masses, 10 kings, whatever the case is. But it's going to be a far cry from what it is today with 193 different, presidents and prime ministers and kings and sultans, etc. Now, a little rabbit trail for me here. This is from the article World War One from Impossible to Inevitable. This is written in 2014 by Anatoly Kaletsky, and I caught it on Reuters years ago. But listen to what he says, what he writes, and this is again from 1914, and he was talking about the 100-year um, anniversary of the start of World War One. And he says the great power rotation of 1914 saw the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire in decline, with Germany ascendant. Meanwhile, Britain, with France and Russia as junior partners, sought to maintain dominance in Europe, but their money, military resources, and political perseverances were running out. Today, Russia is a declining power and China is rising, while the United States is trying to maintain the 20th century balance of power, with Europe and Japan as junior partners. Under these conditions, both the rising and declining powers often conflict with nations currently in control. Now, again, back in 1914, The world was still largely under the control, not to say under the control, but Britain was still viewed as a world power back then. Now, skipping down to this, he talks about treaties and how these countries all kind of begin to align themselves with each other with these political and military treaties. And he says, consider this statement by General Sir Richard Sheriff, formerly NATO's second most senior military officer at a debate about Russia. Quote, everyone surely agrees that we would be ready to go to war to defend Britain's borders. Well, as a NATO member, Britain's borders are now in Latvia. Yet, and so the writer goes back to the main point. Yet by June 28th, talking about World War One, war moved straight from impossible to inevitable without ever passing through improbable. 4 years later, 10 million people had died. So when you put yourself in these military alliances with other nations, your borders are not simply your borders anymore, like the borders of Great Britain. Now your borders, because whoever you allow into NATO, that becomes your new border, which is now Latvia. And Ukraine has been desperately trying to get into NATO because they know what it represents. It represents the whole might of NATO and the United States behind you. Well, we're doing that kind of de facto right now without them being in NATO. I mean, you've got Germany, France, and other countries just throwing money and arms and all kinds of technology and information and um, uh, military guidance, strategies, etc., to fight the Russians, which is why this has dragged on as long as it has. Again, this is a huge threat to Russia because if Germany is providing these weapons that's killing your soldiers, you are in the law of war going to go after that nation that's providing those weapons. So Germany is at risk, UK is at risk, France is at risk. There's a lot of countries at risk right now if Russia decides to go ahead and just be done with all this. And they might be because of the drone attacks they had into deep into Russia last weekend. Okay, now the last quote I want to have from this article, and then I'm going to go straight back into talking and then questions. And this is a quote from George Orwell. He says, if you want a vision of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Not very cheery, as it were. However, again, they're not looking at this from the Bible. They're not looking at this from any kind of religious perspective other than, say, human secularism. And they see a dark future. And they see a dark, dystopic, authoritarian future where it's like Skynet in control and the few elite people running everything. And that's how they view the future. And I'm telling you right now, as a Christian, we have an amazing future ahead of us. We don't have anything to be worried about any of this stuff. Now, it may get rough prior to the rapture. I'm not going to say it's not rough now. I mean, many of us are facing trials and tribulations. It's not outright persecution, but it is definitely a soft form of persecution in the terms of, at least in the United States. Canada is a different story. UK is a different story. People there are being thrown in prison for, uh, a post they made on social media, or you've got, people in Canada having their bank accounts frozen because they dared to protest against the Trudeau government or whatever. Yeah. So it's such a weird dynamic to be in. You've got countries like the US, Argentina, Italy, and I think Hungary, if I'm not mistaken, are looking to make alliances together because they all four of those leaders share the same vision in terms of like nationalism. And how does that bode for the woke elite in Davos that want the World Economic Forum's version of the Great Reset, or the United Nations version of the Agenda 2030, or any of these other kind of green leftist agendas that are out there? Those seemed inevitable, but now there's big pushback from certain countries that are big power players, and it's hard to see how this all shakes out just yet. So that's why it seems like things are mixed signals in terms of not just in the United States, but everywhere. You know, it seems like one day things are going great, the next things are terrible, and it just we can't win. At least it seems like we can't win. But that was kind of the gist. I'll post the link to the article. You guys read it at your own leisure. I don't agree with everything he says or what he believes or even his conclusions, but I do think it's interesting what he's tying together in terms of how the technocracy has kind of slipped in. All this political drama is going on up here. The technocracy sleeps in. They begin to implement things, and these things are as embedded into our system now as anything else is. I mean, you're not going to be able to get rid of them. And for example, it's like you can't own things anymore. You used to be able just to go buy a movie, and I guess you could still buy a movie if they still made VHS or they still made DVDs. I don't know if they're making them anymore. I think I mean, there's some, I guess, in Walmart places like that, but DVD, Blu-ray, DVD players, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's kind of down by the wayside. Everything now is streaming. You want to stream everything. Well, you can't own it. I mean, you can only own it as long as the website stays up, or you can rent it or what have you. But that's the perpetual is that we keep spending money over and over on the same things over and over, and that's just to keep us in perpetual servitude to whoever's making said thing. All right, let me go to questions again. And just out of curiosity from you guys, do you like it better when I stand? I tend to move around more and talk faster because I'm or would you prefer me to sit down and be more still? Okay. Liza asked, "Did you hear about the fungus that would kill U.S. crops brought in by Chinese nationals?" I did, and apparently that story's like a year old. I don't know why it's just released now, but the fungus is it's parasitic or it's not good for us. But we already have it here in the U.S. I mean, there are some instances that it's people are dealing with it, kind of like in eastern Kentucky, down in like Pike County and all that. They have kudzu everywhere. And when you drive down there, first of all, let me just say driving in Eastern Kentucky is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, just every time I have to go out, I just I'm just blown away how amazing it looks. But when you get down into the southeastern portion of Kentucky, back in the early, I want to say 1920s, 1930s, the railroad industry brought in kudzu to uh, because they couldn't keep mowing all the grass along all the railways, so they brought in this invasive plant species, hoping to control the weeds and all that other stuff. Well, now that kudzu's everywhere, and you can't get rid of it. And when you drive down to like those counties, you're looking at these mountains, and they're covered in kudzu. It looks like you're in like an island, a tropical island or something. It's really bizarre looking. But they can't they can't get rid of this stuff. So yeah, I don't know if these guys were bringing it in or what their plans were for it, but um, yeah, that's going to happen more and more. There's now there in Kentucky they're talking about there's this new like Asian needlepoint ant or something that's incredibly painful when it bites you, stings you, or whatever. Brooks says stand or sit. Yeah. Okay. Sir Pierceville, Tim Pool. Oh. Okay. Rudyard Lynch on the Tim Pool episode. Okay, got you. I'm tracking. From Abel Gurma, do you think Diddy trial is a distraction? Absolutely. Yep. Yep. I mean, that guy deserves to spend the rest of his life in jail, but like just how all this stuff shakes out, it's always a huge distraction. Suzanne Hawes, question: do you think the rapture will lead to the 144,000, and what effect will that have on the world? Um, I honestly don't know how the 144,000 are going to play out. In my book, Hobo Volume 2, I represented them as children that just appeared in the streets of Jerusalem, and they all started marching up, singing the various alleyways and through the old city, all up to the Temple Mount, where the two witnesses were. Um, is that how it really plays out? I have no idea. That is a huge fascination to me because there are 144,000 for each from the 12 tribes, minus Dan and Ephraim, I believe. And then is it Dan and Ephraim or Dan and Manasseh? That's going to bother me now. Um, yeah, but I know that like the Left Behind, Tim LaHaye, and all those were saying that they would be 144,000 Pauls. Maybe they are. I mean, if they're being put there by God and they're spirit filled and they're protected, etc., I got to imagine they're going to be pretty evangelistic, going out and sharing the gospel, especially with in Israel. Let's see. Yeah, Dan and Ephraim are the two tribes that are missing. So you have Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. And if you remember, Joseph had two tribes attributed to him since he was kidnapped and thrown in the well, and then ended up in slavery in Egypt, and then became the number two in Egypt. Well, by the time Isaac came down and blessed him and everything, both of Joseph's children, who were from a Gentile bride, an Egyptian woman, uh, they were included in that said. So there's always like, I think there's like in total like 13 or 14 tribes, but at any given time there's 12. And the Levites typically don't count themselves in the tribes when it comes to like wars and things like that, because they don't go, their job is as priests purely to do the temple work and stuff. So okay, what effect do I have? I think honestly, the 144,000 are going to be for the nation of Israel. I don't think they're going to be, but maybe they do go out to the whole world. I don't know. It's a lot of speculation that we think that they're going to be evangelists, but why else would they be there? I mean, the church is gone. You've got martyrs. You know, the tribulation saint martyrs are just, I mean, dying in numbers that can't even be counted. And somehow they come into the scene around this time frame here. So it's really hard to say what role they specifically played, but we know that they do play a role. God's not going to just do something arbitrary like that, just that for no effect. The Great Awakening 3 question: do you think the 144,000 could be the male children that were slain by Herod during the time of Jesus' birth? No, I don't think that many children died during that time period. Historic population records support this in parts of the Bible too. I don't. That seems like an awful lot for the first century. I mean, the whole world population at that time was like 200 million, and that included the Roman Empire. I mean, well, it could be a little bit more than that, but I guess it's speculation, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 million. Um, I don't know. It could be from that. It could also be from all the Jewish children that had died going back to the time of Moses. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. One second here. All right, talking to household six before she goes to bed. Um, this question here is from Brooke, and I want to answer this because I love answering this question. Um, I don't think that, well, first, I don't think animals are raptured. I don't think that happens at all. Could God allow for, like, if you live in a house and you're gone for the day and you normally keep your dogs caged up and um, you're raptured and now they're stuck in a cage. Like I think God can allow for angels and other things to work those type of scenarios out, but I think our animals will not make it. At least I don't think they'll make it through the 7 years. Maybe some of them will, but I do think we can see them in the kingdom age when the earth is restored and the natural order is brought back into the Edenic like state. I don't see why animals can't or our pets can't be brought back into that world and that situation. Um, I don't know, and you could have a dog that lives for 1,000 years. I mean, that'd be pretty amazing. I don't know where they go into eternity. I don't think they go into heaven or to the cosmos or anything. I think they're going to be terrestrial bound, but the Earth is going to remain, right? The Earth is going to remain. If you listen to Lee Brainerd in his book Renovation or Recreation, is it a new heavens or new earth, or is it just a renovated one? And I tend to agree with him on the renovated thing, that the earth will be renovated by fire in much the same way that the earth was purged with water. The earth didn't disappear; the earth was still there. I mean, obviously, the ark landed, and trees and things had begun to grow back. And I think that the same case will be with the fire at the end. I think the earth will be purged with fire. But the same place where Jesus was seemingly defeated, he's going to come back and be victorious on. And I think that this earth holds so much history of our story. And why would God wipe all that story out, go through all the process of doing everything he's done with the earth, and then just destroy it and create some new kind of planet that humans have no attachment to whatsoever? I want to be able to go and see where the Israelites crossed, the Red Sea, or where Noah's Ark really is, if it's not, currently the place where everybody thinks it is, or the Ark of the Covenant, or where David slew Goliath, or on and on and on. I mean, there's so many things that we are curious about, and that we have history and attachments to the past, that I think that it's incumbent upon. I don't want to say it's incumbent. It serves a better purpose, I think, to keep the earth, but purge it of the pollution, of the trash, of the all the bad stuff that had been here. And I think God is going to be able to do that perfectly, renew it and restore it. So thank you, Brooke, for that question. Let's see. Sue, okay, we did that one. We did that one. What do you think? This is from Grateful GMA. What do you think is behind the food distributor UNFI getting hacked and halting deliveries? I don't know anything about that. I have to apologize. I don't know if you're talking about the food deliveries that were trying to go into Gaza, that Hamas had been, Hamas was getting all this food from charity or NGOs and stuff, and then they were selling it to the people of Gaza. They weren't giving it away; they were selling it, making money off of it. So the people finally got fed up, and they just bum rushed these food places and started taking the food for themselves. And then the Hamas started shooting, and so then they blamed it on the Israelis. I don't know all about the UNFI. I don't know if that's the same thing or not, but that's really all I know about the food stuff. From Misha 777, Pete, do you think we'll see the Great Reset before the rapture, before tribulation? I don't. I don't tend to. I don't see that. Now, if there is some type of cyber attack or cyber Armageddon or whatever, 9/11 equivalent to a cyber event that happens between now and then, I think that that would probably greatly expedite the process of going digital, which definitely contributes to the whole Great Reset thing. But I don't. I don't think we're going to see it the way the United Nations plans on seeing it, and they don't even plan on really having this in place by until 2030. So they're still a few years away from where they had set their goal. I don't think they're anywhere nearer their goal than they were before, other than the digitalization portion. But everywhere they've tried to these UN policies, these environmentalist policies and stuff, it's caused chaos. Sri Lanka, the Netherlands, Canada, the UK, anywhere that they're trying to ban farming, ban farmers, and do all that kind of stuff, a monkey with the food uh, surplus, it's not worked out very well. So I don't know how much of that we'll see prior to. From Aaron, question, Pete, you have taught on the Final Four window. I've heard scientists have confirmed that they know that Jesus died April 3rd, 33 AD. The Final Four window would fit in 2026. Could be it. Any thoughts? Yeah, I am still of the mind that it could happen between now and 2026. Now, 2026 could come and go, and we're here in 2027. I mean, that's always a possibility too. Tyler and I were both very adamant that we weren't trying to say that this is set in stone. No, we're saying that based on what we see from Scripture, this kind of looks very plausible to us, and we'll keep updating it as it goes forward. But I do like the confirmation of 33 AD. I've always held the 33, the last 10 years or so. Pete, do you think 2020 to 2025 was a 5-year period of grace for the world, as five is said to represent grace? Anyone think this? Um, I know some people looked at, the 2017 Revelation 12 eclipse thing, or not the eclipse, the sign in the heavens, Revelation 12 sign, and they looked at those 7 years from then until 2020. Was it 2024? Can't do math. That they looked at that as like the 7 fat years of Joseph's dream, and then from 2024, which was the other side of the Great American Eclipse, that going forward be the lean years. I don't know if that has any bearing to any of this. I don't know about the 5 years of grace from 2020. I think every day that we have is kind of God's grace is allowing us to continue on as a species. And but I don't know. I don't think there's anything to the 5-year period of grace or anything like that, or 7 years or any of that. The only 7 years that I know that is going to have any real significance, prophetic significance, is going to be the 70th week when that comes into play. From 49er fan, do you think the 144,000 are seen on the earth to witness? I kind of think they do. Or why else would they come? Do you have a favorite possible rapture time this summer? I don't. Again, I don't hold to a particular date necessarily. I do like Tish B'av, which is like late July, early August timeframe, which has been like the day of calamity for Israel, going back to the times of Moses. Um, I do find it interesting that as more and more of Christendom and the conservative side of American conservatism, I would say even in other countries, Western Europe, as they become more anti-Semitic, they're anti-Semitic primarily because they were raised in amillennial churches, or they were raised in post-millennial or preterist churches, or churches that just had a very low view of Bible prophecy. And if you have a low view of Bible prophecy, you're going to tend to have a low view of Israel. You're not going to see Israel very as being significant, or any more significant than, say, Ukraine or Taiwan or any other. You're just another country that has issues, right? From their perspective, they do not see any prophetic significance to the rebirth of Israel, and many of them have now kind of come out publicly and said, well, they don't even think they're real Jews; that they're the like Ashkenazi European Jews or whatever, Sephardic, um, which I think is absolute garbage, anyways. Because like, who was Hitler trying to kill? He killed 6 million of some people. Why would he kill them if they weren't Jews? No, he killed them very. There was a specific reason, because they were Jews, and they were, European. They're French, German, Polish, what have you. Denise Miller. Question: The Pentagon said today that most of the UFO stuff from the Area 51 and other sightings was government cover up for various military weapons we were developing. What about recent sightings? I didn't see that today. I'll have to look at it, but it's been pretty well established that uh, this well, one, yes, the military does have, I believe that they have their hands on some military technology that is not human or not of human origin. Supposedly, they have non human biologics as well. Um, I don't think it was a cover up for military stuff, like traditional military systems that we were working on at the time, because when we defeated Germany, we discovered that they had technology that we didn't even know about. We had the atom bomb and things like that, but they had like this bell-shaped anti-gravity type of technology that we quickly confiscated and secured in the American Southwest. Now, of course, they're going to deny everything right off the bat, and they've denied it ever since. It doesn't matter how obvious the evidence is; they continue to deny it until the Commander Grush, not Grush, the Tic Tac video that was recorded by the F-18 pilots in the Pacific, that was pretty much irrefutable proof that there was things operating that we don't understand, and they're not human, and they're not human technology. So that is definitely the the cat's out of the bag at this point. There's no hiding that. So I'm not sure what the Pentagon was going on about. I'd have to go back and watch that whole thing. And from Melinda Ventura, question: Okay, a friend said the rapture is way off because we are the bride of Christ, are far from ready. Please advise. Well, first of all, the rapture is not dependent upon our readiness or not readiness. The bride, that is. I think that time, the date for the rapture from the Father, has already been set in place, a long time ago, thousands of years ago. So that really doesn't have anything to do with it. But I hold to the belief, and I talk about this all the time, that the seven letters to the seven churches, although they were real churches in the first century, it does have application for all churches of all this last 2,000 years. But because of the order that they're put in, seems like there's a chronology or prophetic chronology in there that would highlight the different epics or eras of the church age, the church dispensation. And the last dispensation, or not the dispensation, the last era, the last church that's dominant on the earth is the Laodicean era, is the Laodicean church. And what does Christ say? Christ has nothing positive to say about this church. It's the only church he has nothing positive to say about. In fact, he only has negative things to say, and that she's lukewarm, she thinks she's rich, she's really poor, blind, and naked. Um, and Christ is not even inside the church; he's on the outside knocking. Hey, let me in. Let's have dinner together. Um, so the status of the church at the very end, in conjunction with all the other things, like what Paul's talking about, 2 Timothy 3, what Jude talks about, what John talks about, what Peter talks about, that things are going to go from bad to worse. So this whole idea that the church has to make itself ready is very post-millennial, in my opinion. And I just kind of throw that out with that's garbage theology because it's not taught anywhere in the Bible that the church has to make herself ready before Christ can return at the rapture. Now, there is an expectation for us to be ready, which is what the epistles are and what Paul and the others have encouraged us and exhorted us to live each day as if Christ would come that day. And with that mindset, we would have the proper perspective of how to live each day, even if the world around us is completely pagan, completely taken over by sin and wickedness. That we're supposed to be salt and light. So there is that general expectation and specific expectation that we do that. So I don't think when it says the bride has made herself ready inside of Revelation, it's talking about the church already up in heaven and the wedding supper of the Lamb. It's not talking about us on the earth having to prepare ourselves for the rapture. Two different things. Watchwoman Deborah, Jesus is the way. Song of Songs 2, does that give us a hint of a season? I think it was talking about the springtime. So, I think you're talking about verse 10. For my beloved spoke and said to me, rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. For lo, the winter is past and the rain is gone. The flowers appear on the earth, and the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land, and the fig tree puts forth her green figs, and the vines with the tender grapes give good smell. Rise up, my love, my fair one, come away. Uh, Certainly possible that it could be a springtime event. I just don't think that the rapture is associated with any of the traditional feasts, the Jewish feast or the feast of the Lord. Um, I think that's going to play out with Israel inside of the tribulation. So we had the first three feasts that were fulfilled with Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. Then we had a gap of 50 days, and then we had Pentecost, which is the conception of the church. I call it the conception, not the birth of the church. And then we've had 2,000 years, and then but in the season that same year, right? So you would have the gap of 50 days, and then you would have the summer was kind of no feast, and then the next feast would be in the fall with the Feast of Trumpets, I believe. So that's a possibility. I'm not sure who Song of Solomon's is taught is. I don't know if that's something we could apply necessarily to the church, since the church was a mystery at that time. But maybe it is. I don't know. It's certainly possible. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater on that one. Okay, last two questions here. Emil, or no, M. Lyle. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Emily. Question: where will God the Father and the angels be during the millennial reign while Jesus is here on the earth? Will they stay in heaven until the earth is made new? I believe that's it. I believe that he stays in heaven and Christ is ruling and reigning on the earth. And I think the Holy Spirit is present in heaven. I don't know what role the Holy Spirit is going to play during the kingdom age on the earth. And here's the thing about salvation during that time period. It's impossible to please God without faith. And what is faith? But it's the substance of the things that's hoped for, right? Not seen, but Christ will be seen. He will be physically visible, ruling and reigning from Israel, from Jerusalem, much in the same way that a leader today rules and everybody can know and sees there, etc. So he's going to physically be on the earth, ruling and reigning. And you're not going to need faith to worship him as Messiah because he's going to be right there in front of you, So uh, I don't know. I know that salvation is always by grace through faith. Yet inside of the kingdom age, you're going to be able to physically see Jesus. So it's not like something you see in what is it, Hebrews 11. Let's see if I can quote this right. It's like never, very rarely do I ever open it, and it's just like the right page. Hebrews 11. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For it by the elders obtain a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which were seen were not made of things which are visible. So faith is believing and trusting in something we can't see. but we will see Christ in that, or those people that the mortals that are born during that time period will be able to see Jesus. So I don't know how exactly that's going to play out. I don't even pretend to understand that portion of it. We know that the temple is going to be in effect, and that there will be sacrifices during that time period, according to Ezekiel 40 through 48. I tend to think that the sacrifices have a more pragmatic nature to them. They're not just memorial, or they're not just to memorialize the death on the cross or anything like that. I think that I think it may have more to do with like ritual purification for people that are not like the church. Like we'll be in our redeemed, glorified bodies, but they're going to be in their normal mortal bodies. So it may have something to do with ritual purification, and et cetera, et cetera. So not entirely too sure. Nothing else to lose. Question is it true in Isaiah 63 that the Messiah that that the Messiah returns and is a Muslim killing tornado? I don't, honestly, I think that most of what we call the Muslims are going to be wiped out in the Gog and Magog conflict, and that'll be very early, even before the tribulation starts. So it may be in the gap between the rapture and the tribulation. You got to think about it though. Gog and Magog, most of those countries are Sunni, with the exception of Persia or Iran, which is Shia. But you're going to have both Shia and Sunni hordes coming, and just coming from all over, trying to destroy Jerusalem. And it's, I say this all the time, but it's like the Crusades, but in reverse, and it's from every direction. And they're going to be Muslims, and they're going to be wiped out. And I think after that war, you're going to have there's still going to be Islam, but it's not going to be nowhere near as militant as it is today. It's going to be like Buddhism is today. It's just going to be kind of a minor thing, and it's just going to get sucked up into the beast, the mystery not the the mystery Babylon, the horror Babylon religious system, or whatever that is. So it's just going to be wrapped up in that. But the militantism is going to be removed from it, because all those guys are going to be wiped out. Sorry to lose my voice. Sorry. Annette asked, so when the bride and spirit say come, Pete, what do you think it's referring to? I think it's kind of like in I think it's in John, or it's in Revelation 10, where the kingdom is pronounced as as good as there, as good as it's it's good to there. It's already being declared early on, even before the end of the tribulation. I think this is kind of reversed, where now the spirit and the bride say come. We're still beckoning people at the end to come to the Lord, to make that decision to join the bride at this point. Because if they're reading this beforehand, before the rapture, they will be part of the bride. So I think that's the whole spirit behind why we teach prophecy, and why we are trying to warn people ahead of time that this world's not going to continue on just forever. It's got a shelf life, and it's coming to its end. It's coming to its expiration point at this moment. So I think that the whole idea with the spirit and the bride saying come is that the Lord is still beckoning people to come to salvation before it's too late. Well, folks, thank you for hanging tonight. Just saw that Tyler's video went down. I guess his internet was down or something, and they just had a ton of storms that just passed through North Texas. And my wife was calling me, telling me about the pool and everything. But thank you for coming tonight. I I didn't do my admin stuff early on, but there is a prophecy conference in Ohio, July 9th through the 12th, I believe. And this is going to be the prophecy pros, Jeff Kinley and um, Todd Hampson will be doing that there. And I'll post the flyer I have for it. It's in northern Ohio. She told me the name, and I always forget the name, but I was thinking it was around Columbus, but it's north of Columbus by an hour or two. And then we have the Prophecy Conference that's coming up in Texas, in Rockwall, Texas. I believe it's the weekend of the 19th of September. And I'll be speaking at that one. I will not be speaking at the July one. And then there's the Prophecy Watchers Conference in Oklahoma, which is always a good time. I'll be speaking at that, and then finally that last conference, if Lord, if we're still here, if the rapture hasn't happened by then, May 2nd is going to be in Mississippi, Flowood, Mississippi, at the Sheraton there. That will be myself, Tom Hughes, and Alex Newman, and Chris Gaucher and his wife Kathy Gaucher. Um, they're the ones putting it on, but it is going to be a fantastic event. Can't wait to have it. And then I've invited Alex on. I've talked to him once before, but he's going to come on the show. We just got to work out a time to do it, a date, and then I'm trying to get the rest of my calendar laid on for everybody that's coming on this month. So we'll have some more, many more conversations. I am locked in with Lee Brainerd on the 16th. That'll be a two-parter. One will be on my channel, one will be on his, and we're talking about the things that are different are not the same. And I think the 16th we're talking about salvation by grace versus salvation by works, and why they can't be the same thing and why they're not. And so we'll go into that. And then the second iteration of that is going to be more prophetic, why the second coming is not the rapture and vice versa. So much more discussions to come. I do plan on having more guests on, trying to get Mondo Gonzalez on. There's a ton of people that I need to bring back on, Pastor Gary and others. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. I really appreciate you being here, and not just tonight, but every Monday night that you're with us, or Saturday nights during the approaching midnight. I do think Saturday I may talk about unequally yoked, about the marriages between believers and unbelievers, and how that fits in with prophecy and how that fits in with our relationships. I do want to kind of get onto that and talk about that, because I know that's a big issue nowadays. I want to thank the moderators for helping out tonight with the questions and just kind of wrangling everything. And let me know if you like the me standing up. I tend to be a little bit more active and energetic than if I'm just sitting down. But I also am kind of bouncing around too. That's how I am. But thank you guys. Yes. God bless every one of you guys. And Lisa Nelson, if you can, shoot me a message. Let me know whatever happened with the thing we were looking at. You were looking at bringing somebody over. I just want to know what happened. Is it going to happen or not? So that'd be cool. Thank you, Wiggle Watcher, for Jesus, and all the super chats. Thank you guys for that. I definitely appreciate it. And then that's it. I'm going to quit rambling. God bless you, Maranatha, and we'll see you on Saturday night at 9 p.m. Bye.